between you and Stuttgart? Is it more Stuttgart's more body stuff, paint, and then you guys are suspension, motor work? Is that the split between that?
Given the capacity that we have right now and the space that you see here, yeah, that allows us to do the majority of the mechanical work. Obviously, when we're doing body, if there's slight issues and things that can be taken care of, obviously with Porsche-approved collision centers, we can take care of smaller, minor needs here. But this car, the 911S next to us here, as I showed you earlier, it's amazing what you can do with paint correction. I mean,
absolutely,
this car doesn't need to be repainted.
Yeah,
it can be corrected now.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's incredible. So, and I'm glad you brought up as far as like you guys kind of do the diagnosis. So can you walk us in if somebody wants to come in and wants to do something here as far as their car and they're not sure what they want to do? Do you guys kind of almost how a patient goes into a doctor's office and you look at the car and you're like, let us diagnose what's going on with your car first, and then let's go game plan what we can do or can't do. Is that how it goes? Absolutely, it does. It starts either with a phone call or an email or a visit at one of the many events that we do. And then from there, you build the relationship and say, well, I have this white turbo, for example, that's behind us. And this starts out as a conversation and say, well, I think that the body's okay, but obviously it's not running. It hasn't run in 10 years. That type of story. And so we talk about it at a very high level, about what we think it may need. And then it starts with an exchange of photos. You take a little bit closer look at that, but that only can tell you so much. Yeah. And that's really just, again, very high-level discussion. Because at that point, then you have to make the time and the appointment. In this case, it doesn't run, send the car in. Yeah, and you got to ship the car at that point, right? Right, so the car comes in. You have to receive the car, and then it takes a spot in here, and you guys are pushing it around. Yeah. And you do the walk around the car so that the technicians look at everything. And we have extensive paperwork that establishes the baseline of what the car is right now. And from that, you have a prescription of what do you want to do, how far do you want to go into this, because you can start with that, but you just continually funnel this down until you get to the end of the project, because what we think we have just looking at on the outside, as you start to take it apart and get in there, it could be better than you thought, or it could be worse than you thought. Or it could be, it's the better. That's what. Right. Or it could be just fine too in that respect, what you thought. So anything's possible in that respect. But you just continue to refine that down, and that requires constant communication with the owner, with the customer of the car, to determine that. And it's an ongoing process that really doesn't end until the car is being loaded in the trailer, finished, and on its way back home. And even after that, tuning and conversation. I would say, thank you for that explanation, because then your intimacy with the client is probably way bigger than almost at any level, throughout, the Porsche line. Not saying like, one's better than the other, but just saying like the level of intimacy, and communication that has to occur between you and the client is second to none, probably, because you're like, okay, well, here's the deal. This is where your car is at, and it's almost kind of one of those situations like you tell us where you want to go with this, and I'll tell you what that's probably going to look like. So yeah, no doubt. And we recognize the time that it takes to develop that, and that's why we have classic partners, because they realize that it becomes the responsibility and the desire of the classic partner to recognize that they'll have to give the time as well to have that type of conversation, because these cars require that. The newer cars, not so much, because you come in, it's relatively, it's new, and here's a loaner car while we figure this out. In the case of these cars, there is definitely a lot of back and forth, and it's time consuming. And so a classic partner definitely raises their hand and says, we're willing to have that dialogue, take that time, have part of that process here as well. And so, yeah, it's definitely a way of going about the relationship and the business that's taken very seriously. I'm glad you brought that up, because there is quite a bit of vetting process when you guys select a Porsche Classic partner, isn't there? When you decide, okay, I think that you guys have the culture, you guys have the right mindset. Not saying like you personally, but when they make that decision to wave the wand and basically knight somebody as one of those, so when that happens, is it a similar makeup to what this looks like in here when those other centers open, or when they've been deemed? Does it kind of have this same kind of makeup and outlay that this kind of current setup is right here?
It's standard for it.
Yeah, no, it's going to vary from dealership to dealership, and I'm not actually involved in that part of the process, but having just been together like we were up in Chicago, I had a chance to visit Porsche Napleton Westmont, and they're a classic partner. And they have a whole section of their beautiful shop. I don't know if you've been in their new building.
I haven't.
They've been in there about a year, and the facility is absolutely beautiful. And so they have a whole section of the shop that is dedicated just to that, and it's probably close to about this size.
Okay.
It's laid out a little bit differently. But yeah, they're very dedicated to it, because it also is in through the parts end of it as well, because that is really the majority of what the Porsche Classic program is about, is the genuine parts to keep that 70% or more of cars with the parts they need so they can be used and driven on the road. That's the driving factor behind all of this. And so their parts department has to be very involved in that. They're involved with Porsche on it as well, because they have the ability, when they search for a part, when they go into, we call it the PET 2 catalog. That's the system that we have where all the parts are listed. You put the VIN number in and you see what you need, and the diagrams are there so that you can see exactly the part number. And one of the first questions that when we look something up is, does this need to be in the catalog? Yes or no? It's a real simple, and it's 100% hit every time. It goes directly back to Germany. So if a customer, for example, were to want a part for their car that they can't seem to find, they really need to contact a classic partner or an authorized dealer. Any authorized Porsche dealer can look into that system as well and find the parts and get this type of response back, because that is what prioritizes the work that goes into figuring out what the almost 300 parts are or should be that we reproduce or add to the catalog every year.
Okay.
So right now there's over 52,000 parts that are in that catalog, and every year they add almost 300 more to it. So how do you figure out what the priorities are? And when it's worked through the system that way, we get a much better input to learn.